our case, it was set under George Jones's White Lightning song, or a cover of that. And we showed it to potential investors, and that worked. I can tell you that that video probably sold more than one of the investors on getting in on the project, as well as some of the cast and crew. We had a 2-person camera department, we had a 2-person G&E department, we had a 2-person audio department, and a 1-person art department. And that is minimally what we need to make the show go. Of course, it would be great to be able to invest in more help, but as far as what we need to minimally make the show, that's what it takes. Organization was very, very important from day one. I would consider myself an organized person. I don't lose things. I can find just about anything that's in my possession pretty quickly. And one example of that is we had a little mismatch with versions of a script. One of the actors downloaded a version of the script and renamed it, which took the dating convention out of the name. And then later on there was some confusion as to what was the latest version. And that's something that we were able to figure out just like that. And I'm sure that most studios, companies, what have you, have systems in place for locating those files quickly and being able to figure out what's what. But that was just one thing that we identified early on. It's like, hey, like the less time that we spend looking for stuff, the more time we can spend on important tasks. And so organization is just a little thing that goes a long way. We do want to have fun when we produce the show, but one thing that's non-negotiable on set is professionalism. We do expect that the cast and crew will show up prepared, and we had a great time with that. All the crew showed up, they were on their A game. All the cast showed up, they had their lines memorized. We didn't have to do a whole lot as far as motivating people to act like professionals go, because we tried to engage with professionals from the get-go. Even if it was the first time for someone in certain roles, like I've never been an executive producer on something like this before. We had a first-time director. Many of our cast were having a principal role for the first time. So there were a lot of firsts on this set, and we didn't expect people to necessarily be perfect, but we did have a standard for effort, and we had a standard for professionalism. The intangibles: showing up on time, having a good attitude, being kind to your colleagues, and being good stewards of the locations that we had access to. Any entrepreneur should file an LLC. That's just a basic part of running a business. You want to protect yourself and keep your assets contained either to your personal life or to the business. I think separation of those things is very, very important. When it comes to the movie business, we will actually file an LLC for each individual season of the show. That way we can keep assets and liabilities tied to that particular show and/or movie. For example, you look at the Star Wars movies. Each of those movies are organized by their own LLC, such as Empire Strikes Back LLC, Return of the Jedi LLC, so on and so forth. And it's important to do that because you want to be able to tie your assets and liabilities to one particular season. Let's say you're on season 5 of a show and you've blown up, you're much bigger than you were in season 1. And let's say you get someone from your first season that was on the crew that maybe rolled their ankle or something. And they've seen how successful the show has become, and they want to, maybe they sue you or something when you're in your 5th season. If they sue you and they were only employed by the LLC of the first season, they can really only have a case against that one LLC. And so if you have bigger assets tied up in different LLCs, it's a little bit safer that way. Most entrepreneurs, I think that they tend to avoid the nightmare scenario, because most entrepreneurs, you would imagine, are smart enough to avoid putting themselves in situations where they could be exposed to liabilities. But in a world where many people are trigger happy with lawsuits, you got to do the right things to protect yourself and protect your people. We structure contracts involving deadlines by just clearly stating the deadlines and the milestones and the expectations in the contract. And we don't put pressure on people to sign. It's kind of an inside joke in the company. We hand someone some paperwork and they sign it immediately, and I'm like, well, don't you want to read that first? And not that we're engaging in any predatory behavior, but when we sign people with deadlines involved, such as the editorial department, we're like, hey, these are the deadlines and you're going to be required to meet them, but you should go through the contract first, and you should understand the work that it's going to take to meet those deadlines on time. And if you don't think that for whatever reason that it's an attainable deadline, then let's talk about it and let's change it. We don't want to have people sign to something that is unattainable. Of course, we do the homework on our end to make sure that we're setting realistic expectations and deadlines, but ultimately, it's up to the contractor to communicate whether or not they can meet those deadlines. One way to stay efficient when it comes to contracts and legal things is to have templates. You sit down with an attorney, have them write out a standard crew contract, and that is the language that pretty much governs most contracts. You have pre-written language that affords you protections and that you can use as a framework for other contract requirements. And you don't really need to worry about the liabilities of those things because you've discussed it with an attorney already, and it's just pretty standard. You hand that contract to everybody. Just like appearance releases. We just had to write one appearance release, and then you print out 20 of them for your background actors. And it just moves like that. And you know, if some of them want to take those to an attorney of their own before they sign it, you know, God bless them, that's their right, and we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna push back on that. But most of our contracts are pretty standard as far as industry contracts go. Right now, I'm the one that's in charge of making sure that all the contracts are signed and kept, and we're gonna aim to expand our staff a little bit next season to have someone take care of that, because it is something that is, I never handled that on set. I should have. Instead, what I did was go back through the footage and see who appeared in the background. You know, let's say we're talking about background. I would go back through the footage and see who appeared, and I would say, okay, we need to get a clearance from that person. And then I would track that person down and get that paperwork done. And it's easy for me because I hang out at the lake all the time. And so, you know, it's just another weekend for me if I go up there and take some contracts for someone to sign. But in the future, it would be much more efficient if we had someone on set whose job it was to track who is on camera and get those contracts signed while we're working on setting up a scene or whatever. When it comes to pitching the project, it was interesting because we tried some experimental things that I hadn't seen tried before. Many people will put together some sort of sizzle reel if they have a pitch for a project, or some sort of proof of concept. They'll go out for a day or two and they'll shoot a proof of concept. What we did is we put together a little outline of the story. You know, who are the main characters? Where does it take place? What are some of the themes? What are some of the problems? And we actually created an AI pitch video that's about 30 seconds long. In our case, it was set under George Jones's White Lightning song, or a cover of that. And we showed it to potential investors, and that worked. We showed that video when we were hiring cast and crew as kind of a, hey, this is what you can expect the product to be like. And I thought that was effective. I can tell you that video probably sold more than one of the investors on getting in on the project, as well as some of the cast and crew. And I just don't think that we've seen that before. You know, we see sizzle reels, but I don't think that we've seen people leverage AI specifically to pitch movies and TV. We've seen people leverage AI for their movies and TV shows, but I don't think we've seen people leverage AI to pitch human-made movies and TV shows. We set the budget season by season. Our fiscal year is from March to February. And so January and February, we sit down with the backers, we discuss basically what the next year is gonna cost operationally. And so we have annual expenses, things like Google Workspace, Google Drive, you know, those are year-to-year subscriptions. And then we have things like production expenses, like what's it actually gonna cost on set every single day, post-production expenses, marketing expenses. All of those things are structured a little bit differently, and they're all need-based. And so we sit down in January and February and figure that out for the year. There are a lot of hidden expenses in production, especially with season 1 being the first time that I have budgeted and ran a production at this scale. We did run into a lot of instances where we're having to go back to the actors and say, hey, we need a couple extra bucks for this, we need a couple extra bucks for that. And we were blessed to be in a position where they understood, and the priority for everybody involved was making a good product. It's not necessarily about ROI yet. Someday we'll reach that point where ROI becomes more of a priority, but right now the most important thing is getting the show made and getting it made right. And so even if we have to go back and ask for a couple extra dollars here and there, there's no hard feelings. I do everything I can on my end to not make a habit out of that, because reputationally I think that matters a lot. But we are also so thankful that the people who are supporting us financially understand that some things pop up. For example, we had an actor lose his voice for half the shoot, so we did not budget for any ADR in January or February of last year, but all of a sudden we're sitting in June and we're like, man, we're gonna need some cash for ADR. And they hooked us up. So things of that nature. And then I'll get into marketing as not necessarily unexpected, but I think not a lot of people know that you need to spend just about as much in marketing as you do on production if you even want a little bit of a chance at a return on investment. And so that was one thing that surprised me early on when we were just researching all that. The number one priority funding-wise was talent, both in front of and behind the camera. We need good actors. We had good actors, incredibly talented people, showed up prepared, knew their lines, and just killed the roles. Every single actor that we had performed fantastically. So you can't be cheap there. You also can't be cheap on behind the camera personnel and equipment. I mean, the talent on camera can only take you so far. I mean, they have to look good, they have to sound good, and that doesn't mean that they don't sound or look good naturally. But on the technology side, you need to do the right things to make sure that those good looks and good sounds are translating to the screen for your audience. The third thing that we're not cheap on is morale, leadership, organizational structure. And that's not necessarily a money thing, but it's more of a time and effort and philosophy thing. We want to do things the right way. We want to run business the right way. We want to conduct relationships with people in such a way that they want to keep coming back to our set every single day. We don't want people to wake up dreading work for us. We deprioritized optional help. There are some days where I was maybe feeling a little lazier than others, where I'm like, man, I would love to have a PA or two to help me out on something here. And you know, we just were better equipped to have that money allocated elsewhere. And so it just comes down to, sometimes you just gotta suck it up and do the dirty work. And all my professional experience prior to this was as a PA. And so, you know, I don't wanna say that I'm used to it, but I certainly have plenty of experience with some of that less glamorous work. And I was willing to do those things if it meant a better product. The way that we work with ROI as it concerns our backers is when they come into it, they understand that they potentially will not see a single dollar back for multiple years after the project is done. I think that that's something that more people who invest in things like this should understand, is the ROI is not going to be as quick as other investments. And so there's an element of patience, there's an element of grace. The priority is getting the show made and off the ground and in a position where we can make ROI. Market rate is a generous term to use when it comes to how we compensated everybody. We were not shy about the fact that this was a lower budget show. We were not shy about the fact that we just simply could not afford market rates that you could argue that everybody on the show deserves. We appreciate everybody taking a little bit less money for maybe more of a fun experience than they would have on other sets, and for the potential of the show to be bigger and get to a point where we can afford to pay people market rates, which is certainly the goal. When we hire collaborators, the one thing that we look for early on is loyalty, especially early on like this, when people could have any reason to leave your project. The grass is always greener. In the case of a, you know, the film equivalent of a startup, I'm sure that you could ask around the cast and crew, and they would probably tell you that there's areas with greener grass where they could be, but for whatever reason they chose to be with us. And you know, we'll always appreciate that aspect of loyalty. And you know, we're pretty proud of the fact that we're going to retain 90% of our cast and crew for season 2, and just creating an environment where people want to come back, fostering loyalty, but also it's reciprocal. We want people to be loyal to us, just like we're loyal to them. Skill was important here too. Obviously, I'm not very experienced. I don't think anybody who was a department head for the very most part had a ton of experience on sets like these. You know, we had a few people that have been around for a while, but I'm gonna say at least 70% of our crew was in their respective position for the first time. And so skill really mattered a lot because it gave them a chance to prove that they can do those skills at that level. And it also gave us the confidence that they can do those things, and that we don't need to do any sort of training or have this type of oversight to make sure that things are getting done correctly, because we know that things are getting done correctly. So skill is certainly important. I wouldn't say that it's the main reason that we hire someone is because of their skill. There's other non-tangibles that we look for, like reliability. I mean, I don't think you can teach someone to be reliable. You can't teach someone to show up on time and have a good attitude. All of those things are just part of the personality, so to speak. And you know, there's only so much time and effort you can put into correcting deficiencies with those types of things. Our primary locations are around a lake that many of the locals consider to be a party lake. Lots of fun is had up there, and I think that certainly helped with morale. So we shot 2 weeks. On that weekend in between the 2 weeks, the lake had their annual poker run, which is when all the Lakers will set up some sort of game at their house, and you can go around on the boats and visit each house, and it's like a whole circuit. Of course, there's booze at every stop. There's some other party favors at every stop, and you know, Hollywood being the party industry that it is, I know that everyone that came to the poker run really enjoyed themselves and, you know, just had a really good time on the party lake. I mean, who doesn't have fun on the lake, right? Put plainly, the biggest financial risk behind indie production is that you may never see any of that money again. And we took a lot of care to make sure that the backers understood that risk, and that they understood that the potential for ROI is just as great as the opposite of that, where there is great potential to lose all your money on a project like this. My experience with recruiting the backers was less of a pitch relating to ROI and more of an understanding that they enjoy the type of shows, they enjoy the type of art that we're making. A lot of times when people in Hollywood are pitching a movie or a show, a lot of times they'll have comparables like this movie meets this movie. And I'm gonna say 90% of the time, that's all it takes to pitch a studio on making something. You know, successful title meets successful title, iconic movie meets other iconic movie. I think that that's probably the most effective way to pitch anything these days, and studio executives will probably agree with that. When I say Trailer Park Boys meets Breaking Bad, most people know exactly the type of vibe I'm talking about. And so it was less of a, hey, Mr. Investor, we're asking for this, here's what you can earn back from it. Rather than that, we pitch it as an experience. Hey, Mr. Investor, what would you think about this type of show? Would you enjoy watching this type of show? Would you watch this type of show with your friends and family? Would you sit down over dinner and watch an episode once a week when it airs on Thursday? Things like that. During the course of season 1, we took a lot of care to make sure that a lot of the repeatable tasks were either automated or created as some sort of template to where it would be very easy to repeat that task later on. We created a lot of systems in season 1 as far as document management goes, personnel management, fundraising, bookkeeping, all those boring administrative things that nobody in an entrepreneurship position really wants to spend a lot of time doing. We created systems in season 1 to either automate or make more efficient for season 2. We have call sheet templates, we have script templates, we have editing templates. I mean, like when you watch an edited video, sometimes there's a bookend at the end with like a logo or an outro or something. We've created all those assets. And you know, even if it saves you 5 seconds, those 5 seconds compound. And so the things that we can get away with doing only one time, we try to just do it one time so that we're not repeating ourselves over and over. When we were budgeting for the show in pre-production, we set up cash flow for production, post-production, and marketing. So in a way, those were 3 separate budgets. Going into season 2, we set those as one budget. I think it's more efficient. We've always been honest with our backers about what it's gonna take to make this show, but many of the expenses associated with post-production and marketing were unknown to me during pre-production. But now that we've gone through a whole season, I mean, we're at the point now we've gone through pre-production all the way up to marketing and distribution with season 1. We know what these hidden expenses are. We know some of the things that may or may not pop up that could pose extra expenses. And so we're just able to prepare for that a little bit more effectively going into season 2. What's different about that is most scripted sets could have as many as 200 people on the crew. I mean, when you're talking about huge movies coming out of Marvel, Disney, what have you, I mean, those are massive, massive crews. And we're not even trying to make a show on that scale. But what helps us keep things efficient and what helps our production model succeed is that you hire extremely efficient people. We actually crew up as if we're a reality TV set. It just makes sense for what our story is, what our characters are doing, the set design, the lack of sophisticated lighting setups. We are not lighting for cinematic scenes. We are lighting for docu-reality style type of scenes. And many reality shows, you don't know what's gonna happen. You can't tell your talent to land in a certain spot on the set. You really can't interfere with your on-screen talent that much, period. And so we adapted our scripted crew to produce this as if it was a reality show, Really the only difference that makes this not a reality show is that there was a script and that it's fake and that we had actors. If we were creating a reality show with real talent, there wouldn't be a whole lot of difference aside from the absence of actors in a script. Hey everybody, I'm Ben Richards, founder of Intravision and executive producer of HILLBILLY Hoosiers. To keep up with everything that we're doing and to grab merch from our store, follow or subscribe at intravision.us or visit intravision.us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Literally, like 10 hours before the call time, the director wrote a scene from scratch, completely new scene. Looking ahead at the schedule, we noticed that there was a day that was pretty outdoor heavy, not a whole lot of overhead shelter, with heavy rain. And it seemed like the only workaround was either to swap days out or to rewrite the scene to be indoors or safe.